Hey guys, we are on the final 2 chapters of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Today we are going to read part 1 of chapter 15 or chapter 16 because it's really long. So we're going to break this one into 2 parts. Chapter 16 is titled Through the Trap Door. In years to come, Harry would never quite remember how he had managed to get through his exams when he half expected Voldemort to come bursting through the doors at any moment. Yet the days crept by, and there could still be no doubt that Fluffy was still alive and well behind the locked door. It was sweltering hot, especially in the large classroom where they did their written papers. They had been given special new quills for the exams, which had bewitched with anti-cheating spells. They had practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick called them one by one into his class to see if they could make a pineapple tap dance across the desk. Professor McGonagall watched them turn a mouse into a snuff box. Points were given for how pretty the snuff box was, but taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all nervous, breathing down their necks while they tried to remember how to make Forgetful Potion. Harry did the best he could, trying to ignore the stabbing pains in his forehead, which had been bothering him ever since his trip to the forest. Neville thought Harry had a bad case of exam nerves because Harry couldn't sleep, but the truth was that Harry kept being woken by his old nightmare. Except that it was now worse than ever because there was a hooded figure dripping with blood in it. Maybe it was because they hadn't seen what Hagrid had seen in the forest, or because they didn't have scars burning on their foreheads. But Ron and Hermione didn't seem as worried about the stone as Harry. The idea of Voldemort certainly scared them, but he didn't keep visiting them in dreams. They were so busy with their studying, they didn't have much time to fret about what Snape or anyone else might be up to. Their very last exam was History of Magic. 1 hour of answering questions about batty old wizards who'd invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they'd be free for a whole wonderful week until their exam results came out. When the ghost of Professor Binns told them to put down their quills and roll up their parchment, Harry couldn't help cheering with the rest. "That was far easier than I thought it would be," said Hermione, as they joined the crowds flocking onto the sunny grounds. "I needn't have learned about 1637 werewolf code of conduct or the uprising of Elfric the Eager." Hermione always liked to go through their exam papers afterwards, but Ron said this made him feel ill, so they wandered down to the lake and flopped under a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling the tentacles of a giant squid, which was basking in the warm shallows. "No more studying," Ron sighed happily, stretching out in the grass. You could look more cheerful, Harry. We've got a week before we find out how badly we've done." "There's no need to worry yet." Harry was rubbing his forehead. "I wish I knew what this means," he burst out angrily. "My scar keeps hurting. It's happened before, but never as often as this." "Go to Madame Pomfrey," Hermione suggested. "I'm not ill," said Harry. "I think it's a warning. It means danger's coming." Ron couldn't get worked up. It was too hot. "Harry, relax. Hermione's right. The stone's safe as long as Dumbledore's around. Anyway, we've never had any proof Snape found out how to get past Fluffy. He nearly had his leg ripped off once. He's not going to try again in a hurry. And Neville will play Quidditch for England before Hagrid lets Dumbledore down." Harry nodded, but he couldn't shake off a lurking feeling that there was something he'd forgotten to do, something important. When he tried to explain this, Hermione said, "That's just the exams. I woke up last night and was halfway through my transfiguration notes before I remembered we'd done that one. Harry was quite sure the unsettling feeling didn't have anything to do with work, though. He watched an owl flutter toward the school across the bright blue sky. A note clamped in its mouth. Hagrid was the only one who ever sent him letters. Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid would never tell anyone how to get past Fluffy. Never. But Harry suddenly jumped to his feet. "Where are you going?" said Ron sleepily. "I've just thought of something," said Harry. He had turned white. "We have to go see Hagrid now." "Why?" panted Hermione, hurrying to keep up. "You don't think it's a bit odd," said Harry, scrambling up the grassy slope, "that what Hagrid wants more than anything else is a dragon? And a stranger turns up who just happens to have an egg in his pocket? How many people wander around with dragon eggs if it's against wizard law? Lucky they found Hagrid, don't you think? Why didn't I see it before?" "What are you talking about?" said Ron, but Harry sprinting across the ground toward the forest didn't answer. Hagrid was sitting in an armchair outside his house. His trousers and sleeves were rolled up, and he was shelling peas into a large bowl. "Hello," he said, smiling. "Finish your exams? Got time for a drink?" "Yes, please," said Ron, but Harry cut him off. "No, we're in a hurry, Hagrid. I've got to ask you something. You know the night you won Norbert. What did the stranger you were playing cards look like?" "I don't know," said Hagrid casually. "He wouldn't take his cloak off." He saw the three of them look stunned and raised his eyebrows. "It's not that unusual. You get a lot of funny folk at Hogsmeade. That's the pub down in the village. Might have been a dragon dealer, mightn't he? I never saw his face. He kept his hood up." Harry sank down next to the bowl of peas. "What did you talk about, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all?" "Might have come up," said Hagrid, frowning as he tried to remember. "Yeah, he did ask what I did, and I told him I'm gameskeeper here. He asked about the sort of creatures I look after, so I told him. And I said what I'd always really wanted was a dragon, and then I can't remember too well, because he kept buying me drinks. Let's see. Yeah, then he said he had the dragon egg, and we could play cards for it if I wanted. But he had to be sure I could handle it. He didn't want it to go to any old home. So I told him after Fluffy, a dragon would be easy." "And did he seem interested in Fluffy?" Harry asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Well, yeah. I mean, how many three-headed dogs do you meet? Even around Hogwarts. So I told him, Fluffy's a piece of cake if you know how to calm him down. Just play him a bit of music and he'll go off to sleep." Hagrid suddenly looked horrified. "I shouldn't have told you that," he blurted out. "Forget I said it. Hey, where are you going?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't speak to each other at all until they came to a halt at the entrance hall, which seemed very cold and gloomy after the grounds. "We've got to go to Dumbledore," said Harry. "Hagrid told that stranger how to get past Fluffy, and it was either Snape or Voldemort under that cloak. It must have been easy once he got Hagrid drunk. I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Ferenzi might back us up if Bane doesn't stop him. Where's Dumbledore's office?" They looked around as if to see a sign pointing them in the right direction. They had never been told where Dumbledore lived, nor did they know anyone who had been sent to see him. "We just have to," Harry began, but a voice suddenly rang across the hall. "What are you three doing inside?" It was Professor McGonagall, carrying a large pile of books. "We want to see Professor Dumbledore," said Hermione, rather bravely. Harry and Ron thought. "See Professor Dumbledore," Professor McGonagall repeated, as though this was a very fishy thing to want to do. Why? Harry swallowed. Now what? It's sort of a secret, he said. But he wished at once he hadn't, because Professor McGonagall's nostrils flared. Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago, she said coldly. He received an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic and flew off to London at once. He's gone? Said Harry frantically. Now? Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, Potter. He has many demands on his time. But this is important. Something you have to say is more important than the Ministry of Magic, Potter? Look, said Harry, throwing caution to the wind. Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone. Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was carrying tumbled out of her arms, but she didn't pick them up. How do you know? She spluttered. Professor, I know that someone is going to try to steal the stone. I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore. She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow, she said finally. I don't know how you found out about the stone, but rest assured, no one can possibly steal it. It's too well protected. But Professor... Potter, I know what I'm talking about, she said shortly. She bent down and gathered up the fallen books. I suggest you all go back outside and enjoy the sunshine. But they didn't. It's tonight, said Harry, once he was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. Snape's going through the trapdoor tonight. He's found out everything he needs, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way. He sent that note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get a real shock when Dumbledore turns up. But what can we... Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron wheeled around. Snape was standing there. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. They stared at him. You shouldn't be inside on a day like this, he said, with an odd, twisted smile. Harry began, without any idea of what he was going to say. You want to be more careful, said Snape. Hanging around like this. People will think you're up to something. And Gryffindor can't really afford to lose any more points, can it? Harry flushed. They turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. Be warned, Potter. Any more nighttime wanderings, and I will personally make sure you are expelled. Good day to you. He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out on the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. Right, here's what we've got to do, he whispered urgently. One of us has got to keep an eye on Snape. Wait outside the staff room and follow him if he leaves. Hermione, you'd better do that. Why me? It's obvious, said Ron. You can pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick, you know. He put in a high voice. Oh, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I got question 14B wrong. Oh, shut up, said Hermione. But she agreed to go and watch out for Snape. And we'd better stay outside the third floor corridor, Harry told Ron. Come on. But that part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time she lost her temper. I suppose you think you're harder to get past than a pack of enchantments, she stormed. Enough of this nonsense. If I hear you've come anywhere near here again, I'll take 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house. Harry and Ron went back to the common room. Harry had just said, at least Hermione's on Snape's tail, when the portrait of the fat lady swung open and Hermione came in. I'm sorry, Harry, she wailed. Snape came out and asked me what I was doing. So I said I was waiting for Flitwick, and Snape went to get him. I've only just got away. I don't know where Snape went. Well, then that's it, isn't it? The other two stared at him. He was pale and his eyes were glittering. I'm going out of here tonight, and I'm going to try to get the stone first." "You're mad," said Ron. "You can't," said Hermione. "After what McGonagall and Snape have said, you'll be expelled." "So what?" Harry shouted. "Don't you understand? If Snape gets hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Have you heard what it was like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it, or turn it into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore. Can't you see it? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the House Cup? If I get caught before I can get the stone, well, I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have, because I'm never going over to the dark side. I'm going through the trapdoor tonight, and nothing you two can say is going to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember?" He glared at them. "You're right, Harry," said Hermione in a small voice. "I'll use the invisibility cloak," said Harry. "It's just lucky I got it back." "But will it cover all three of us?" said Ron. All three of us. "Of course, come off it. You don't think we'd let you go alone?" "Of course not," said Hermione briskly. "How do you think you'd get the stone without us? It'd better go and look through my books. I'd better go and look through my books. There might be something useful. But if we get caught, you two will be expelled too." "Not if I can help it," said Hermione grimly. "Flitwick told me in secret that I had 112% on his exam. They're not throwing me out after that." After dinner, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of the Gryffindors had anything to say to Harry anymore, after all. This was the first night he hadn't been upset by it. Hermione was skimming through all her notes, hoping to come across one of the enchantments that they were about to break. Harry and Ron didn't talk much. Both of them were thinking about what they were about to do. Slowly the room emptied as people drifted off to bed. "Better get the cloak," Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan finally left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs and got upstairs to their dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed it to use on Fluffy. He didn't feel much like singing. He ran back down to the common room. "We'd better put the cloak on here and make sure it covers all three of us. If Filch spots one of our feet wandering around on its own..." "What are you doing?" said a voice from the corner of the room. Neville appeared from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor the Toad, who looked as though he'd been making another bid for freedom. Nothing, Neville, nothing," said Harry, hurriedly putting the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. "You're going out again," he said. No, said Hermione. "No, we're not. Why don't you go to bed, Neville?" Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Snape might even now be playing Fluffy to sleep. "You can't go out," said Neville. "You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble." "You don't understand," said Harry. "This is important." But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. I won't let you do it," he said, hurriedly standing in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you." "Neville," Ron exploded, "get away from that hole and don't be an idiot." "Don't you call me an idiot," said Neville. "I don't think you should be breaking any more rules. And you were the one who told me to stand up to people." "Yes, but not to us," said Ron in exasperation. "Neville, you don't know what you're doing." He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt out of sight. Go on then, try and hit me, said Neville, raising his fist. I'm ready. Harry turned to Hermione. Do something, he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. Neville, she said, I'm really, really sorry about this. She raised her wand. Petrificus totalis, she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides. His legs sprang together, his whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood and then fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaws were jammed together so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. What have you done to him? Harry whispered. It's the full body bind, said Hermione miserably. Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry. We had to, Neville. No time to explain, said Harry. You'll understand later, Neville, said Ron, as they stepped over him and pulled on the invisibility cloak. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't feel like a very good omen. In their nervous state, every statue's shadow looked like Filch. Every distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. At the foot of the first set of stairs, they spotted Mrs. Norris skulking near the top. Oh, let's kick her, just once, Ron whispered in Harry's ear, but Harry shook his head. As they climbed carefully around her, Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes on them, but didn't do anything. They didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase up the 3rd floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so that people would trip. Who's there? He said suddenly as they climbed toward him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. No, you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you ghouly or ghosty or wee student beastie? He rose up in the air and floated there, squinting at them. Should I call Filch? I should. If something's a-creeping around unseen. Harry had a sudden idea. Peeves, he said in a hoarse whisper, the Bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible. Peeves almost fell out of the air in shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. So sorry, your bloodiness, Mr. Baron, sir, he said greasily. My mistake. I didn't see you. Of course I didn't. You're invisible. Please forgive old Peevesy. He's just a little joke, sir. I have business here, Peeves, croaked Harry. Stay away from this place tonight. I will, sir. I most certainly will, said Peeves, rising up in the air again. Hope your business goes well, Baron. I'm not bothering you. And he scooted off. Brilliant, Harry, whispered Ron. A few seconds later, they were outside the 3rd floor corridor, and the door was already ajar. Well, there you are, Harry said quietly. Snape's already got past Fluffy. Seeing the open door somehow seemed to impress upon all 3 of them what was facing them. Underneath the cloak, Harry turned to the other 2. If you want to go back, I won't blame you, he said. You can take the cloak. I won't need it now. Don't be stupid, said Ron. We're coming, said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. As the door creaked, low rumbling growls met their ears. All 3 of the dogs' noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it couldn't see them. What's that at its feet? Hermione whispered. Looks like a harp, said Ron. Snape must have left it here. It must wake up the moment you stop playing, said Harry. Well, here goes. He put Hagrid's flute to his lip and blew. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note, the beastie's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew breath. Slowly, the dog's growls ceased. It tottered on its paws and fell to its knees. Then it slumped to the ground, fast asleep. Keep playing, Ron warned Harry as they slipped out of the cloak and crept toward the trapdoor. They could feel the dogs hot, smelly breath as they approached the giant heads. "I think we'll be able to pull the door open," said Ron, peering over the dog's back. "Want to go first, Hermione?" "No, I don't." "All right." Ron gritted his teeth and stepped forward over the dog's legs. He bent and pulled the ring of the trapdoor, which swung up and open. "What can you see?" Hermione said anxiously. "Nothing, just black." "There's no way I'm climbing down. We'll just have to drop." Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved Ron to get his attention and pointed at him. "You want to go first? Are you sure? I don't know how deep this thing goes. Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep." Harry handed the flute over. In the few seconds' silence, the dog growled and twitched, but the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into its deep sleep. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trap door. There was no sign of a bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging on by his fingertips. Then he looked up at Ron and said, "If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the Owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right? See you in a minute, I hope." And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell down, 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 and flump. With a funny, muffled sort of thump, he landed on something soft. He sat up and felt around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. And that is where we're going to leave chapter 16. Bye, guys.